Good afternoon, and welcome to episode 41 of 5 Reasons Not to Harm Your Loved Ones During Quarantine. Today we have some pretty exciting news for those of you that weren't listening to the governor's press conference at 10 a.m. this morning. She has opened up retail businesses by appointment only, and she is allowing gatherings of up to 10 people. She's also declared that non-emergent healthcare and veterinary care, which I think includes dog grooming, yay, are now allowed. However, it is required in those circumstances that you have the proper PPE and the proper social distancing. For those of you that missed it, I think it was the day before yesterday, in that episode, I did talk about to business owners specifically about the MIOSHA guidelines that are the requirements for opening your business. Really, really important guidelines, especially the one that says that you have to have a written plan. I will be posting the template after we're done for those of you that need a template to write your safety plan for your business and how you're going to deal with employees who may have symptoms or customers who may have symptoms or contact. All of those things are addressed. So as for our COVID-19 fun facts of the day, I actually didn't write down the numbers. Let me get those. My secret source here. Not really that secret, but it's handy. None of my printers are working today, so I'm kind of try to do this with it on the screen, and I'm old and it's not my comfort level, so be patient, please. So today, the details, in addition to what I just told you, the numbers are continuing to go down, but that is in light of the testing going up, and really was trying to find you some numbers today. If you do think that you have COVID-19, you do have an obligation, as well as the government and the medical care providers do, test, trace, and protect. And that's really been the motto that has slowed the spread in Michigan. So while I'm waiting for the numbers to come up, today we're going to talk about 3 different things that involve schools and kids. Specifically, if you remember at the beginning, one of those, I think it was in the 5 to 10 episode week, we had, I had talked about different issues with kids in special ed every single day. And I urged you all to be in contact with teachers and IEP teams and counselors and directors of special ed, and have distance learning provisions added to the IEP, or some sort of addendum plan that everyone agreed was going to take place. Obviously, that would look different for every student. It would look different in every district. But we can't enforce something that's not in writing. And so it was really important that people do that. What has happened recently, yesterday actually, is there's a group of people in Philadelphia, kids have, with autism, have filed a lawsuit against the governor saying that they're being denied an education during the pandemic. And basically, what they're saying is that it's a class action that was filed, which means it has a lot of unrelated plaintiffs, but have the same similar situation that needs to be rectified. This could potentially affect thousands of students within the state of Pennsylvania. And basically, at the heart is a claim that the governor failed to name as life-sustaining services those that provide in-person education to nonverbal and partially verbal children with autism, kids for whom online instruction and services are ineffective. There is no plan for them. And he needed, they're saying that he needed to declare their learning as a life-sustaining service so that it would be considered the Michigan equivalent of essential, and they would still be getting their learning. I think it's really, really interesting, and there's a lot of media about it. It challenges certain districts, the way they were handling special ed services, period. It also, there was another one filed in Hawaii last month and one filed in New Jersey. And they're asking parents to waive some of the rights of their child under the IDEA to resolve these lawsuits. So it's really, really interesting. And, you know, I have no love lost for Betsy DeVos, as I've told you before. And she has basically not commented, and she has not sought to obtain a waiver or a suspension of the federal requirements. So it's really interesting. A lot of it doesn't add up when you look at it from all the different sides. But basically, the governor ordered all Pennsylvania schools shut for in-person instruction on March 16th. He extended the closure till April 9th. And then and basically the plaintiffs in this case, which are two 7-year-olds with autism that were attending school in the same district, used to spend 32.5 hours a week receiving educational and therapeutic services. At school, they received one-on-one services from a range of teachers, aides, and service providers. Right now, they get 1 hour a week. And in talking to some of the kids that I've been involved in their IEPs or in their programming accommodations and supports, some of them are really, it's great what they're getting now that they're home, and some of them is awful or next to nothing. And I think a lot of that is attributable to how involved the parents have been both in the delivery of education services and supports while they were in a brick and mortar school, and also how well they're communicating with the team and the teacher. And you know, I was just speaking to someone yesterday who said that, you know, although it's less than it would have been in school, they have communication with the teacher about 3 times a week. A packet is dropped off at their home each week, and you know, then they went into all the other services that they're getting. It's not as much, but it is not, the gen ed students aren't getting as much either. So remember, if you give it to one group, you have to give it to the other group, and so it's very imperfect. No one was ready for this. No one knew how to do this. So it doesn't excuse non-compliance with the law, and certainly it doesn't let them off the hook. But it's something that, you know, we need to pay attention to, because our kids are going to be behind when they go back to school, whether they're gen ed or special ed. And so it's really important to identify now where the shortcomings might be so that you can figure out a plan with the educators when they go back to school. So with that in mind, the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, we will move from Pennsylvania back to Michigan. And so this was a broadcast on NPR in Michigan, the local Michigan affiliate. and they talked about 9 ways that schools will look different when and if they reopen. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. Just in, I pointed you to that West Bloomfield and some of the universities had made decisions, but we didn't go into any details. So today we'll go into details. And after this, we'll go through the CDC recommendations for going back to school. So this is basically, some of the things that will happen is when kids stand in line, they'll obviously be 6 feet apart. They're going to be very, very long lines. And then there has been a collaboration between the hardest hit states governors. It includes like New York, Michigan, New Jersey, California, are just 4 of I think there's 10 of them that are part of this collaborating committee. And they're coming up with kind of a federal plan for how this should be done that complies with the CSC recommendations. This would only apply to public schools, whether they be in the lower elementary school, preschool, through high school, public universities. That's who this applies to. It also could apply to any institution receiving any federal funds, even if they're private. So that includes a lot of other private institutions. Probably the one that is the least that's the least likely to fall in that category would be the parochial schools, because they get their money from the archdiocese, not from the federal government. Or perhaps, if they were tribal schools, that might have a different component as well, that wouldn't apply to them. So, they'll be required to have stepped up health and hygiene. They'll have to have, hand sanitizer everywhere. They'll have to be able to wipe off the door handle after every person uses it. They will have no contact to flush the toilet. It'll be a foot pedal kind of thing. There'll be a foot pedal to open and close the door of the stall. There'll be hand washing instructions. There will be, that's probably one of the biggest differences. And, in Denmark, they reopened their schools on April 15th. And basically they had the children line up in the morning next to traffic cones. There were only 10 children in a classroom with 1 teacher. Specialists such as art teachers and other lessons were still done remotely or by a video chat. There were 5 children at a time allowed on the playground. And basically they played a game called shadow tag that kept them 6 feet apart. So you had to tag the shadow of the person, not the person. So it's interesting. And so then the second one that we're looking at here is that our class sizes would be less than 12 kids, not less than 10. And then, hold on, I just lost my screen. And then, sorry about that. I don't know what I did. I was surprised. And then the staggered schedules, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, how they'll have some kids that go brick and mortar on Monday and Wednesday, some kids go brick and mortar on Tuesday and Thursday, and then Friday they're all video and the school is disinfected. Or they've also been talked about mornings and afternoons, but basically they need to be able to keep the social distancing, and they're going to have to make smaller class sizes. So it's going to be a logistical issue. When I first heard that, though, I started thinking about what that does for teachers. Obviously teachers teach many hours of the day, but now that they are going to have less students in each class and there'll be additional classes, are we going to need to hire additional teachers? As you know, the state budget in Michigan just took $21 million out of the education funding to fight COVID-19. So where is this money going to come for these additional teachers? And so that will be interesting. If it's, and one solution might be that half the class has it live and the other half has it by video at the same time. So it's still the same for the teacher as far as the amount of students and the amount of grading and everything else. So just something to think about. The other thing is that they would put younger students in school first. They are much easier to control as far as, I don't know if I agree, keeping themselves away from each other, or certainly, with scheduling and staffing, they're the easiest to schedule, I guess, is kind of what they're saying. They're also the most likely to put their hands in their mouth, I thought that was interesting. There would be a new calendar. A lot of schools will be starting school earlier and continuing through next summer, or both. And they're going to have longer breaks. One example that I heard of yesterday, this is happening at my son's college. He's going to be a freshman, and they're starting a week earlier, and then they're going to get out of school for Thanksgiving. They'll take their finals virtually. Like, they'll be on campus till Thanksgiving. They'll take their finals virtually, and then they won't go back until after New Year's. So they'll be like pretty much a lot of the flu season. They'll be able to be home and safe, and it will all be one big giant experiment. The number 6 is that they'll have different attendance policies at the various schools, and because some people are not, it's believed some people under any conditions are not going to let their kids go to a brick and mortar school. And because of that, they're going to, they'll relax some of the attendance policies for, basically for people's comfort, for their child's health, things like that. Excuse me for 1 second, we have little problem here. Let me just deal with this right now. 1 second before this dog is jumping all over my cast. Joys of being at home. So 1 second here. Sorry about that. Okay. I hope he doesn't start to bark, because that would be really irritating. Okay, so there will be in the new school opening, there would be no assemblies, there would be no sports games or parent-teacher conferences. They would not allow parents to mix in large groups. They probably won't allow parents to be in the school building at all. There would be, number 8 would be a remote learning continuation, and that would mean that the schools would have to identify in a much better, much more organized and cohesive fashion which families do not have internet, which families do not have computers, which families do not have tablets, and which children don't have an adult or an older teen who's savvy enough to hook it all up for them. And there'll also, so this is something that, is, although they, jumped into action and did the best they could with remote learning right now for this school year, I mean, what we have right now isn't going to cut it for next year. It's going to be mandatory. It's not going to be optional. It's going to be graded. It's not going to be the foofs that they have now. So it's really something that they need to deal with. They want the kids to understand that they have these, that they're going to have these technology requirements, and they're going to have to do their work at home. And so that's also something, the setting where kids learn is always a big factor. So families are going to have to designate a space, and that's the learning corner, or just like we had a timeout chair. And so that's, another thing to keep in mind. The other thing is that, there's going to be a lot of social and emotional support for kids. This has obviously been very disruptive. It's been a lot of unknowns. It's been scary. It's been, it's been, a lot of the end of the world fear, bigger fears than kids ever had before. They've seen not only their lives disrupted, but for many of them, for the first time ever, they've worried because their parents are worrying about money, about putting food on the table, about, still trying to help people in need when they're not sure if they're going to make it, if they're not sure they can reopen their businesses, if they're not sure they're going to be able to be in business if they can reopen. Kids feel that anxiety from their parents or their caregivers or guardians, and they don't understand it. They don't understand that it's not an absolute, it's not certain. It's just sort of a worry, a paranoia. And so there is going to be, when the schools open, whenever that is, a lot of emotional support, a lot of education about feelings and situational anxiety, things like that. And they are also going to do like wraparound support. So if, there may be a tutor, a therapist, and then everything else that child would need on a day-to-day. So basically, those are kind of the 9 biggies that that they're saying have to be in place for a school to reopen safely. As I mentioned earlier, the CDC did publish some guidelines, as to reopening schools. And I will post this on the Facebook page after we're done, since I wasn't able to print it out and do it in my usual way before. But basically the CDC guidelines for reopening schools say every child over the age of 2 must wear a mask while in school. They cannot share any items or belongings. They can't share cubbies. They have to have their own. They have labeled containers. They cannot share electronic devices, crayons, toys, learning aids. Again, we're requiring schools to have more supplies, more devices. We have no money in our budget. So, these are just more things to consider. The desks have to be 6 feet apart. They all have to be facing the same way. There has to be 1 child per seat on the school bus, and there has to be an empty row between each student. There has to be sneeze guards and partitions wherever you cannot put people 6 feet apart. There's going to be one-way routes in hallways that keep people 6 feet apart. as well as on sidewalks and on the walls. There'll be no communal shared spaces. So there won't be playgrounds, there won't be cafeterias, there won't be big assemblies, there won't be field trips. There would be very limited volunteers and almost no visitors. The same children will stay with the same staff all day. They won't switch groups and they won't switch teachers, so that you're with the least amount of different people, or the student is, each day. There'd be staggered arrival and departure times for students to limit the exposure to crowds. And there would be, if possible, daily temperature checks for every student coming into the building. There would also be rules for students, faculty, and staff about cleaning and disinfecting throughout the day. And also there would be mandatory hand washing times. So those are the CDC guidelines that are going to be adopted and incorporated into the 9 necessities for the schools to reopen. And that is going to be a someday, not a next week, not a it may be in some form in, for the coming school year. As I mentioned yesterday, West Bloomfield put out 3 possible plans that they'll adopt for the fall. And some of the universities have said yes or no to being on campus. I'm really excited that my son's university has decided to be on campus, because I feel like they missed out on so much of their senior year because of this, that at least they'll get to do that in a normal way. So that's pretty much, I wanted to get you the numbers really quickly. Let me do that. And let's see. 1 second. And while that's coming up, I will see if any of you have any questions about anything, about schools, about special ed, about IEPs, about opening your business, about yesterday we talked about jury duty. And I really love your insights. I love your questions. I love your topics. I feel like I learn every day when I'm putting this together for you, and I love that. So, just let me know what, if there's anything that you're thinking. And so the numbers for today, that's the date. How did they publish the numbers today? How did they not publish the numbers for today? Well, I can give you that there are, these are the national numbers, and they're crazy. There are 5,047,377 total confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the United States. There's 329,816 total deaths, and it is present in 188 countries. And I think that was the world, that was global, those numbers, not the United States. Doing very well today with my stats. With that, I will remind you the 5 reasons not to harm your loved ones during quarantine. Protective services workers are essential. The police are essential. That's another thing. As we talk about our prisons and jails are hotbeds of COVID-19. 5 inmates sued the Oakland County Jail in federal court, and 1 actually some temporary relief. And it's a very long opinion by that just came out yesterday, and it's a big analysis, and I'm happy to post that on the page as well if anybody types yes right now that they want to see it and read it and her rationale for the release. Very, very interesting, but it is about 75 pages long. And so that's the other thing about jails and prisons and their conditions. Number 4 is that parents can get in trouble for kids being kids. And number 5 is that very few people, if any, look good in horizontal stripes. And so with that, I will say goodbye, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay home, stay healthy, enjoy the sunshine, take a walk, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.